Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here. We begin our service, as always, by welcoming all that you bring with you to this space, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs and background and lifestyle and experiences. All that helps make you who you are is welcome here this morning. So thanks to everyone, and welcome to everyone who is in the room with us, including those who might be joining us for the first time today. We're glad to have you. And welcome to the many of you who are streaming with us from home as well. We're always so glad to know that you're with us. So glad to have all of you here. I'm going to make a couple of announcements. One, I think many of you know I was gone last week to Denver to attend my first Heterodox Academy conference, or the HXA conference as they call it. If you're not familiar with the term heterodox or heterodoxy, just think the opposite of orthodoxy, and the idea that we can have many thoughts and still function well together. So this was mostly a gathering of academics. I was perhaps the only non-academic there, but I found it to be a very good space for me to be, and I am going to set aside a sermon in July so that I can share some of the insights about that gathering with you. So more to come. Next Sunday's guest speaker is going to be the public historian Logan Camporelli, who will tell the dramatic story, one that we've become familiar with here in Spokane, of how he discovered Spokane's redlining covenants, which barred non-whites from living in certain Spokane neighborhoods, and they still remain on the deeds in many of our mid-century properties, although they're no longer considered legal. So he's going to talk with us about uncovering that piece of history and perhaps some solutions to this issue. This week I will also be away, not attending. I will be outside of the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly with other demonstrators gathered there to make our presence and our concerns known, hopefully. So if you by any chance are planning on being there and want to join in those demonstrations, the key times would be Wednesday afternoon, around 2, and Thursday morning around 8. And then we'll probably table some throughout, but those would be the key times to gather. So, okay, the last announcement today is Happy Father's Day. So, yay, fathers! I'm guessing if you are not a father, you at least had a father. So, and probably many father figures in your life. So this is a day to be grateful to them. I got a text from my daughter, Happy Father's Day, call me when church is over. So, so that feels good. Yeah, so why don't we take a few moments for fathers to hold their babies. Oh no, she's leaving. We don't mind the crying. Yeah, take some time to greet one another this morning, please.
Happy Father's Day to you. Happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you.
Sometimes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, someone else is going to do the story. But I love your glasses. Hey, did you like my friend Eddie last week? Do you remember Hobson Eddie? Yeah, he has glasses like you, doesn't he? Yeah, I like him. He's smart and friendly. Oh, where did you get those shoes? You should take those bubbles home for me. Will you take those home and share them with your brothers and sisters? Here comes Theo. Hey, Theo. Do you want to go when the time comes? Yeah, sure. I'll tell you when, okay? Like grandma. That's great. All right, you take this home, okay? You want to take that home? You don't want to take it home? Okay. What do you think? Are we ready? Want to do it? Yeah. Here, Theo, let's do this one. Ready? All right. Do one more. There you go. All right. Good job. Good job. Good job.
I want to take this.
Okay, you take that home, okay?
What's this?
That's bubbles. You blow it. You'll learn how. All right, that was fun. Thank you guys for coming up, and I needed a hug, a Father's Day hug from my surrogate children. Okay, let's see. We're gonna move on now, right? By lighting our chalice. Yes. The symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
The following words were written by Beth Azar. Harking back to Sigmund Freud, some psychologists have characterized religious beliefs as pathological, seeing religion as a malignant social force that encourages irrational thoughts and ritualistic behaviors. Of course, psychology's doubts, and those of countless others throughout history, haven't curtailed religion's powerful hold on humans. Religion has survived and thrived for more than 100,000 years. It exists in every culture, with more than 85% of the world's population embracing some sort of religious belief. Researchers who study the psychology and neuroscience of religion are helping to explain why such beliefs are so enduring. They're finding that religion may, in fact, be a byproduct of the way our brains work, growing from cognitive tendencies to seek order from chaos, to anthropomorphize our environment, and to believe the world around us was created for our use. Religion has survived, their surmise, because it helped us form increasingly larger social groups held together by common beliefs.
Well, in my opinion, we don't have very many religious rituals in our church, but we do have one little one that we do at the solstices and the equinoxes. And Monday will be the summer solstice. So if you look to the right of the pulpit, you will see that we have the summer banner up. And if you will rise as you're willing and able, we will sing Chant for the Seasons, Summer Verse.
We are now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds, and we've been beginning these past couple of months now with a candle on behalf of the people in Ukraine and Russia and that part of the world. And it just so happens yesterday I put my virtual reality headset on and I was watching a 360-degree 3D video of a young woman in Ukraine, just standing, right in front of me, talking about her experience and talking about how she didn't really pay much attention to the news. She read the news in the morning at 6:30 in the morning, so she went to bed not knowing what was going on and woke up to war and losing power and living in a basement and not being able to call anyone on your cell phone because service is dead. Really real problems, real people are facing right now. And it just really brings it home that these are just ordinary people with the same way of living that we have. They're, looking at her speak and being able to see the beautiful city behind her, those beautiful old world bright buildings in that beautiful part of the world being destroyed. It's no different than if it was happening here in our neighborhoods. So when we kindle this candle expressing our care and our solidarity and our concern, I know that it is very heartfelt for all of us. So I don't ever want it to become rote, to become a ritual of our church, but to be something that is very meaningful to us. And so we begin with a candle for the people of Ukraine. And we will share a moment of silence now on behalf of others that you might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud at this time if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world.
Just let your love flow. Sing along if you'd like. Now there's a reason for the sunshine sky, and there's a reason, hey, why I'm feeling so high. Gotta be the season where the love light shines all around us. So let that feeling take you up inside, and let you reeling where your love won't hide, and you go stealing through the moonlit night with your loving. Now let your love flow like a mountain stream, and let your love grow with the smallest dream. Now let your love show. You don't know what I mean, that's the reason. Now let your love fly like some bird on the wing, and let your love find you to all different things, and let your love shine. You're gonna know what I mean, that's the reason. Now there's a reason for those moonlit nights, and there's a reason for the candlelight, that is the season where the love light shine all around us. Don't let that feeling take you off into space, and let you lie there in that loving embrace and feel the thunder as it warms your face. Now you can't hold back. Come on. Let's sing along. So let your love flow like a mountain stream, and let your love grow with the smallest of dreams, and let your love show. You're gonna know what I mean, yeah, that's the reason. Now let your love fly like a bird on the wing, and let your love find you to all different things, and let your love shine. You're gonna know what I mean, yeah, that's the reason. Let's do it again. And let your love flow like a mountain stream, and let your love grow with the smallest of dreams, and let your love show. You're gonna know what I mean, yeah, that's the reason. And let your love fly like some bird on the wing, and let your love find you to all living things, and let your love shine. You're gonna know what I mean, 'cause that's the reason.
Good morning. What a joyful introduction to the stories for all ages. Hi, kids. The music is for you to run, 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 run. Front. Come over. Yes. Hello. My today's story is based on a Chinese parable. And you like animals? All of them? Yeah. So this is about animals. There was a horse who liked competitions. Perhaps he used to run in races. One day, the horse met a monkey and a squirrel who were having a friendly chat. The horse greeted the two and asked them what they were talking about. "Oh, we are trying to name the most quick-witted and fast-moving animal," they said. And the monkey added, "I bet I'm the one." "Can you prove it?" said the horse. "Let us see who is really fast." "I love competitions," said the squirrel. "Let me be your judge. Look at the apple I'm holding. Whoever gets my apple first will be the winner." The monkey quickly climbed up the tree, took the apple from the squirrel, and began shouting, "I won! I won! I won!" "This is not fair," said the horse, and asked for a different judge. "Shh, how about me?" said the bat as it was flying by. "Do you see that faraway mountain? He who is the first to reach the foot of the mountain will be the winner." No doubt, the horse was the first, right? And he declared himself the winner. "I am not convinced," said the monkey. "I was the winner first." Wow. The horse and the monkey would probably continue arguing if it were not for an old, wise panda. "Let me be your referee," said Panda. "There is a peach tree on the other side of the river. Whoever brings a peach to me will be the winner." The horse swam across the river, came up to the peach tree, but he could not reach any fruit. What about the monkey? There's a little secret about monkeys. Not all of them can swim. This monkey was thinking very hard, figuring out how to get that fruit. "Horse, come back. Please take me across the river so that we both can get peaches." The horse thought it was not a bad idea. He crossed the river and then carried the monkey to the peach tree. The monkey climbed up the tree, quickly picked several peaches. And then they both came back to the other bank of the river, where Panda was meeting them with a big smile. "Congratulations! You are awesome. You're both winners because you work together." Let us think what is going to happen if the world is judged by squirrels and bats. And let us sing the kids out.
Let us meditate on these wonderful words by Mahatma Gandhi. There is a soul force in the universe which, if we permit it, will flow through us and produce miraculous results. Again, there is a soul force in the universe which, if we permit it, will flow through us and produce miraculous results.
And I'm going to invite you to turn to number 434 in the gray hymnal. Number 434 for our reading today. This is a brief reading, so we can read it in unison together. 434. And this was reading I used as the invocation at the Rotary a couple weeks ago. And I thought about how it connected with what the Rotary is about and how it connects with what we're about. So that'll be a nice reading for today. So number 434, read it with me, please. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other.
What I do with this stuff is I record myself playing all the different instruments that I put on the little mini disc. And so what happened a little bit ago is I forgot to turn it off and I don't know where I'm at anymore. So I have 3 songs on here, so we'll have to see if we can find the right one of them, okay? I was going to do a couple songs. One of them was called The Highway to Hell, but I'm not going to do that song. Humble and kind. Hey, we made it. Well, there's a light glows by your front door. Don't forget the keys there under the mat. How when your childhood stars shine, always stay humble and kind. Go to the Unitarian Church, 'cause your mama said to. Visit kin folks anytime that you can. You won't be wasting your time. Always stay humble and kind. Open doors, say please and thank you. Never steal and never cheat, never lie. Sure gonna be mountains to climb. Always stay humble and kind. Don't expect a free ride from anybody. And don't hold a chip or a grudge you don't hear swine. All that bitterness will keep you from flying. Always stay humble and kind. Know the difference between sleeping with just someone. Oh, sleeping with somebody that you love. And never use I love you for a picnic line. Always stay humble and kind. Open doors, say please and thank you. And never steal and never cheat and never lie. Gonna be mountains to climb, but always stay humble and kind. Now when those dreams that you're dreaming come to you, when your work is finally realized, keep your pride deep inside. Always stay humble and kind. summer, you'll do this. You know when it's hot? Get yourself a root beer popsicle. Turn off your AC and roll your windows down. Let that summer sun shine. Always stay humble and kind. Don't take for granted the love that life is giving you. And when you get to where you're going, don't forget to turn right back around. Try to help the next one in line. And always stay humble and kind.
Thank you so much, Brian. When I left the Southern Baptist faith and the Christian religion in my mid-20s, I quickly turned to the somewhat mystical writings of the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung in my desire to better understand myself and the meaning of life. And I ended up reading much, if not most, of Jung's writings, which is no small undertaking given the voluminous nature of his collected works. For many years, I described myself as a Jungian. In fact, the only tattoo on my body, which I acquired in my late 30s, is an image of the Babylonian god of time, Aeon, as depicted in a photograph of a statue actually in two of Carl Jung's books, but in his volumes, particularly his volume that is titled Aeon by the same character. So Jung was an important part of my personal growth and understanding, but by the end of my third decade, having done so much inner work, I finally learned that life isn't about becoming a perfect person without any psychological hang-ups. It's about becoming a functional human being despite our imperfections and personal issues. So my time of concentrated introspection and self-development drew to a close, and I began to focus instead on what I can do as is to be a meaningful and practical use to others and in our world. So I now would consider my life a waste, that is, if not predominantly lived in service to greater causes than myself. Introspection and self-reflection are an important part of individual growth and maturation, but centering our entire lives on ourselves eventually stunts our growth, our development, and turns us into narcissists, which makes us insignificant in the world. Fortunately, my intense and initial interest in Jung led me to also study other psychologists. And psychology is a word you may know that means the study of the soul, from the Greek word psyche or psyche. This became the source of my religious life. The first time I heard this word soul used in this way, as a living presence and reality in our lives, not merely as something that might persist in the afterlife, was the first time that Peggy and I attended the First Unitarian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. It was only the second Unitarian service we had attended, and it was the congregation that we later joined to officially become Unitarian Universalist in 1989. That was just a couple years after we had both left Christianity behind. The guest speaker that day was a man named Phil Smith, a retired UU turned Jungian psychotherapist. He spoke a lot about the soul most of which went right over my head, but I had enough understanding to grasp him saying that it is something essential in this life, not the next. And its health and its well-being is fundamental to who we are. It was the thing that was stirring inside me and that compelled me to go and introduce myself to Phil after the service. And I was pretty shy in those days and kept wanting to step out of that receiving line, but my soul, my psyche, insisted that I stay the course. So I sheepishly asked him if we could possibly meet sometime, and to my surprise, Phil very quickly gave me his number and suggested we get together for lunch that same week, which we did, and that was the start of one of the most important friendships of my life. Phil became one of the few and most significant mentors in my life, and a father figure. Since it's Father's Day, I'll say that. He not only pointed me in the direction of Carl Jung, but set me on a path of self-discovery and the hard inner work that I desperately needed to undertake as a young man. At some point, Phil retired for the second time, and along with his wife Sharon, who were both dear friends to Peggy and I, moved away to North Carolina and eventually to the Northeast. But we stayed in touch, and I stayed on the path that he had guided me on until it came time to branch off into new directions. Phil died of Alzheimer's just a few months after we moved to Spokane, so I hadn't been able to communicate with him for some time. And I wept when I learned of his death in a way that I had not when my own parents died. And that night, I had an unforgettable dream. I was in a funeral home where I saw Phil dressed in a dark suit, walking around, healthy and younger than I had ever known him. It was a place, I understood in the dream, where the living and the dead mingled together and were aware of each other, but we were not able to speak to each other. So Phil gave me a reassuring nod. Then I exited and I found myself walking upon a winding path in the countryside, and I soon came upon Phil sitting in lotus position, meditating in the center of the path. He had been reincarnated as a baby, and he was wearing an extremely crumpled white baby gown. And he looked at me and said, "I guess I still have a few wrinkles to iron out." Phil was a practicing Buddhist and believed strongly in reincarnation, and also had a self-deprecating sense of humor, so this is precisely something he would have probably said. And so I started to continue down the path, and he instructed me to eat your cake and be careful where you park your car. And I woke up immediately, and I immediately knew what he meant by that. Again, it was shortly after I had arrived here in Spokane, and I was in love with the place and with the church, and I really dreaded the thought of ever imagining that I might leave. But I knew what my dream Phil was saying. Enjoy yourself, but don't get stuck in your ways. Keep growing. Eat your cake and be careful where you park your car. I hadn't thought about that dream in many years until the conflict in our own church following the controversy that arose in the aftermath of my book, The Gadfly Papers. I wasn't enjoying it anymore, to say the least. And I knew things had shifted, that I'm not in the same place that I was 11 years ago. I'm imagining that most of us aren't. Difficult as change can be, however, I agree with Dream Phil's mantra. Eat your cake and be careful where you park your car. Life is pointless if we don't experience some joy along the way, even if only occasionally, and even if It's only the joy of enduring the difficulties and overcoming the challenges that we must in order to achieve our own purposes. Exercising to the point of exhaustion is not enjoyable, but it is something that we do so that we can remain healthy. This, to me, is the best way to live life. Not avoiding difficulties and challenges in order to remain happy or content or conflict-free, but to obtain happiness by working our way through them in order to become better and stronger in the process. To find a way to go through the pain and the difficulty and the suffering and the challenges so that we come out better. Because we are going to have them. So I bring this up as an example of how studying psychology on one's own as a novice, not as a professional, can give direction and bring meaning to one's life just as much as, or more, as some other source of inspiration. Right? I had the Bible in my life when I was a Christian, and I shifted to psychology. And those writings were even more meaningful in the end. So if, after all, the soul or the psyche is a significant presence in our lives, not merely something to be saved for the afterlife, shouldn't we turn to the writings of those who have most studied it to better understand it and how to save it right now? To save it right now, to save our souls right now so that we can live a happier, healthier, more holistic life? I believe the answer is yes, which is why when I began working on my doctorate of ministry, I decided to write my dissertation on the psychology of religion. And my advisors initially expressed some concern about my proposal, especially the section I entitled Fundamentalism as Fixation, which I explained by saying, I have found the similarity between fundamentalism and the developmental description of preschool children too precise to overlook. These common characteristics include black and white or extremist irrelative thinking, inconsistent reasoning, illogical contradicting, holding irrational nonsensical beliefs, magical thinking, authoritarianism, yielding to an unquestionable superior, usually a patriarch, and 5, a punitive mindset, meaning the solution to all wrongdoing is monolithically retributive. Okay, so this is why fundamentalist Christians want to tackle the problems of abortion with a law. Right? That's an authoritative, punitive approach. When we know that the best way to respond to abortions in our nation is to reduce the need through proper contraception, sex education, and planning for parenthood with good women's health programs, the things that actually work and have reduced the number of abortions in our country. But this mentality of being against those while claiming to be against abortion and that the only solution is laying the hammer down is part of this fundamentalist mentality, which I believe represents a mind that is stuck at a very early stage of development to chase a rabbit. So my primary dissertation advisor was concerned that I might offend somebody. Me? Never. So even then, in 2009, the dread of saying anything controversial, even if true or at least substantiated, had made some academics fearful of saying anything meaningful. After all, us liberals wouldn't want to say anything that might offend fundamentalists. Still, I insisted that the evidence was on my side and that I would only draw conclusions based on what the research indicates. My conclusion was and is that the fundamentalist mindset is, again, a form of psychological fixation, which means its adherents are stuck or fixated at an immature level of moral and cognitive development. And this is evidenced, again, by those same characteristics ascribed to the thinking of preschool children, which are characteristically black and white thinking, magical thinking, punitive, and authoritarian thinking. Well, my research surveyed what classical psychologists have to say about religion, including famous names like William James, Sigmund Freud, Theodore Reich, B.F. Skinner, Carl Jung, and of course Erich Fromm, among other less familiar psychologists. I also considered the perspective of several developmental psychologists like Jean Piaget, Lawrence Kohlberg, James Fowler, Carol Gilligan, Robert Keegan, as well as other less familiar developmentalists. And in addition to many respected figures in other fields like philosophy and theology, I included some of the most recent research from experts on fundamentalism, like Karen Armstrong, Martin Marty, and Charles Strozier of Chicago University, famous for the monolithic fundamentalist project, among other less familiar experts on that subject. And these figures represent a wide range of thoughts and opinions on the matter, but the simple question binding them all together in this work regards what psychology has to say about religion. Is it healthy or unhealthy? Is it a pathway or is it pathology? So I included chapters about the tendency of most major religions to be or to become patriarchal, fundamentalism in terms of developmental psychology, the tension between freedom and belonging that is inherent within the human condition and our human societies, how our theological ideas evolve in line with our psychological development, right? Our beliefs about God and religion change as we evolve, and the tendency of religion to foster magical thinking. By the way, magical thinking in classical psychology was called the omnipotence of thought, the belief that we can shape the world either with our heads, with our ideas, or that we become extremely idealist and sort of ignore the reality around us in favor of our beliefs. That's also a form of omnipotence of thought. So, for example, we know that the early Christians established egalitarian communities in which they shared their belongings with each other and in which there was neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, as the scripture says, meaning there was no racial, class, or gender discrimination. That sounds like a pretty good society. Unfortunately, it was a short-lived social experiment. And Christianity soon reverted to authoritarianism and inequality. The question I considered is, how does psychology help explain this shift? Why is it, as Erich Fromm says, that Christianity, which had been the religion of a community of equal brothers without hierarchy or bureaucracy, became the church, the reflected image of the absolute monarchy of the Roman Empire? How did that happen? According to Fromm, it happened because the original religion was transformed into another one. As I put it myself, the change occurred not because the original faith eventually spread throughout the Roman Empire, but through its misappropriation by the empire, eventually changing it into the very thing it was born to resist. Christianity became the very opposite of that which it was created to confront. It became, again, as Fromm said, the church, reflected in the image of absolute monarchy of the Roman Empire. Like other primates, Sigmund Freud presumes that small hordes were originally governed by a dominant male, small hordes of humans, governed by one dominant male. After a time, resentful sons band together to kill their overbearing father. Am I doing this on Father's Day? Oh my gosh, bad timing. So feeling resentful, they eventually erect a totem to serve as a surrogate father that they then worship and fear. In the Christian myth, he says, man's original sin is undoubtedly an offense against God the Father, and if Christ redeems mankind from the weight of original sin by sacrificing his own life, he forces us to the conclusion that that sin was murder. According to the law of retaliation, which is deeply rooted in human feeling, a murder can be atoned only by the sacrifice of another life, right? An eye for an eye, fair is fair. Which, by the way, is also a preschool perspective on justice, right? I want to chase another rabbit. I won't. The self-sacrifice points to a blood guilt, Freud continues. And if this sacrifice of one's own life brings about a reconciliation with God, the Father, then the crime which must be expiated can only have been the murder of the Father. Okay? You follow his reasoning there somewhat? So in other words, Christianity became patriarchal out of a sense of guilt. And Jesus' martyrdom came to be seen as a blood sacrifice to alleviate that guilt. It wasn't, it was martyrdom, right, for his social actions, but it became the idea that it was atonement for this original sin, patricide. So if Freud is right, this explains why human gods are usually male, but also why human societies, at least primitive human societies, are usually patriarchal. Freud says the reconciliation of the Father is the more thorough because simultaneously with this sacrifice there follows the complete renunciation of woman, for whose sake mankind rebelled against the Father. Right? So these guys blamed it on the women. They made us do it. They made us do it. It's their fault. They projected their guilt. By this he means that the dominant male controlled access to females, which is why the sons killed him to begin with. So again, after this patricidal act, they projected their guilt onto the women in their group. It's their fault, just as Adam blames Eve for having disobeyed his father's command. Freud's student, Theodor Reich, believes this further explains the bizarre account in Genesis in which Adam effectively gives birth to Eve when she is fashioned from his rib, and the Greek myth of Zeus giving birth to Dionysius from his leg and to Athena from his forehead. And in the Greek play, in one Greek play I should say, Orestes is acquitted of murdering his own mother when Apollo successfully argues the mother is no parent of that which is called her child, as proven by the birth of Athena. Right? The mother is unnecessary. I know it doesn't make sense to me either, but these myths. So at least according to psychoanalysis, as Freud says, religion would thus be the universal obsessional neurosis of humanity. How's that for a conclusion? Based on all this, it's neurotic. Like the obsessional neurosis of children, it arose out of the Oedipus complex, out of the relation to the father, he said. So this view obviously is not very flattering of religion, and some psychologists like William James and Carl Jung, who loves to play with imagery, have more positive opinions about its function in our lives. But my point here is only to give you a brief example of how psychoanalyzing religious myths as if they were a patient's dream or fantasy or stream of consciousness can work. And I'm not going to go into the other topics that I covered in my dissertation today because it would obviously take way too long. Although those who've been around for a while have heard it distilled through my sermons for the past decade or more. So since coming here, I have continued this type of research and have especially enjoyed learning about the relatively new branch of psychology known as evolutionary psychology, particularly its ETAS theory, which stands for the Evolutionary Threat Assessment Systems Theory. So evolutionary psychology analyzes human behavior by considering how it might add to the survival of our species, right? If the whole purpose of every organism is to maintain its genetic information so that it can be passed on, and it has to survive long enough to do that, how does human quirks, how does human behavior enable us to live long enough to pass on that information, for the information to survive? That's the question in the hub of interpreting human behavior, that psychological question. So ETAS is the theory, a part of evolutionary psychology, as cognitive therapist Phil Gilbert explains, that the most important question faced every day by all animals, including humans, is whether their immediate environment is dangerous or not. It's the first thing we do when we go into any new situation, consciously or unconsciously, is answer that question: am I safe or not? And how we respond to this question is an indicator of our general psychological health. If once we assess that there's no danger, we should reach a state of homeostasis. That is, we should be able to relax and go about our business. And we're in pretty good shape. If we remain in a state of hyper alertness and chronic anxiety and tension, even when there is no danger, it suggests that something is awry. And I would further suggest, in our society today, in which there are rising rates of anxiety and tension, it should be a warning sign that there is something awry with our society. So I bring ETAS up only to point out that my interest in psychology hasn't decreased over the years, and I continue to explore it as a primary source of insight in my own ongoing evolution and growth as a human being. Because no matter how old we get, it's one of the beautiful things about being a neotenous species, that is, a species that never fully matures, it retains juvenile characteristics throughout our lives, is we get to keep growing, we get to keep developing, we get to keep evolving. I hope most people will take advantage of that. It's a wonderful way to live. But what I want to begin to close with is the insight, I should say, that I found most valuable through researching and writing my dissertation. And this I can state in a single sentence: religion can be used to drive us deeper into our delusions or help us better cope with reality. Religion can be used to drive us deeper into our delusions or help us better cope with reality, with the reality around us. As I stated earlier, my interest in Jung began to wane in my late 30s as I became more comfortable with myself, flaws and all. Thanks to Jung, in fact, and could begin to use my own agency as a human being, as an individual, imperfect as it is, to make a positive difference in the world and in the lives of others. This explains why in my later years I have become a devotee of the social psychologist, Erich Fromm, whose psychoanalysis of society has helped me shift from inner work to outer work. What makes society tick? And how do we work that out? So the reality around us, as beautiful and as enjoyable as it can be, can also bring us fear and suffering. So we develop many unconscious coping mechanisms that can cause us to avoid the reality around us or to deal with it. Right? Coping mechanisms to help us avoid reality or to cope with it. To genuinely deal with it. Religion is one of those mechanisms. We can use it to avoid and deny reality or to accept reality. To accept life and reality on its own terms. To let the empirical world impress itself upon us. To let it get in. By the way, that's what Freud's definition of the ego is. The interface with reality. The ego exists on the edge between what's inside and outside. It is the interface of everything that is unknown with everything that is outside of us. The unconscious, the world around us. So I don't like to give the ego a bad rap. Usually when people are talking about the ego in a negative sense, they're talking about the id. That idish behavior that says all my desires should be fulfilled no matter what the consequences. Right? And so the ego, which is in touch with reality, says you can't do that. I hate the ego. I got to get rid of my ego. No, you can't get rid of your ego. You want to make your ego healthy. Because if you don't, your id gets projected outward, becomes externalized, and it becomes a superego, an authoritarian figure that happens to agree with you. Right? Like, I really would like to have that person's land. Well, they're heathens. Those are heathens. You deserve to take their land because they should be punished. See, that's the externalization of the id that we call God. We call it a God. And so you got to have that ego that says, no, you can't do that, because if you do that, you're hurting those people. You got to be in touch with reality. So whether you call it an ego or whatever, that interface with reality is very important. It is a bridge, it is a connector, it is a feeler of the unconscious self that only knows what's inside with the empirical world outside itself. So a particular religion like Christianity, for example, can be used to justify our abuse of others in order to achieve our own selfish interest by focusing, for example, on the innate evil in non-believers who deserve to be punished for their sins. How convenient. How convenient. They deserve to be punished for their sins, and we must act as the right hand of God and benefit from it in the process. Or we can focus on its teachings about compassion and justice to recognize our responsibility to help alleviate the suffering around us. Right? Religion does that too. A lot of people that are deeply religious who are inspired to be compassionate beings, helpful, caring beings because of their religion. And the point is that you don't want to miss here is that the same religion, again, can be a means of accepting the difficult realities around us or denying them. The same religion. Right? Christianity, which we're most familiar with in this country, has been used to justify all manner of evil, but also to inspire all manner of good. The same religion. It's the psychological approach through which we confront religion and interpret religion that makes the difference. Likewise, before the Buddha was enlightened, he was a prince who had grown up behind triple thick walls, unable to experience the world outside himself. Triple thick walls. He was essentially autistic, could not connect with the outer world. And when he finally escapes that prison, the first thing he recognizes, when his ego develops enough to where he can begin to be on the edge of his own skin, the first thing he notices is, oh my God, the whole world is full of suffering. People are sick and they're dying and they're growing old. It's terrible. And so his journey from being the prince to the bodhisattva, to the Buddha, to the enlightened one, is a journey of learning to appropriately cope with the reality that we experience pain. That the world can be painful. That's real. I can't avoid it. I have to move through it. I have to go through that pain, and I have to come out stronger on the other side in order to be healthy and functional. This is why at the end of my dissertation, I theologize that reality is God, or that God is reality. Because everything that exists must be real. Right? Reality, as God is thought to be, is everywhere and is everything. Everything that exists is real, even if we don't understand it, even if we can't see it. If it exists, it's real. In fact, reality is the only thing that exists. And it is, as I say in my dissertation, at once the most abundant resource in the universe because it's the only thing in the universe. It's the most abundant resource in the universe, and yet it is its rarest gem. It is its rarest gem. Why? Because in our human condition, we lack much ability to grasp it. We're like, it's like when Moses asked Yahweh to let me see what you look like. Yahweh says, you couldn't possibly comprehend me. Get over there in the cleft of the rock and shield your eyes and I'll show you my rear end. That's the best you can see. That we can't grasp reality. We can see what reality leaves behind. That's the metaphor there. Right? Yeah, and people don't know that was a story of God mooning Moses. It's funny. The reality is to, you can just grasp a little bit and it's what's left behind, right? That's how we grope in the darkness. We reach out for empirical bits of data that we can then construct a picture around. And we keep testing that picture because sometimes it's wrong, or we learn more and the picture changes. So a reality like God is too expansive for us to ever comprehend in its entirety. Yet religion is one of those tools that can help us understand some of it, or to avoid it altogether by remaining stuck behind the thick walls of our unconscious minds. The choice is up to us. The choice is up to us, and what we decide might just save our souls. Thank you.